Hey, what's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC. Today we're taking a look at the Divo Knives Pony Stout. Now, if you're not familiar with Divo Knives, it's a newer knife company from Colin Mason Pierre and Kevin Johnson. You may know Kevin from his YouTube channel, Lefty EDC. And this particular model, the Pony Stout, is actually a scaled back version of another Divo Knives model called the Stout. Now, when I say scaled back, I mean that in most senses of this knife. So starting with the size, it's going to be a little bit smaller, and that does get you to a sub 3-inch blade length, which is important for some states that have limits on the length of locking knives. So this should be legal, I think, in every US state. Obviously still a locking knife, so know your local laws, and if you're out of the country that may be an issue, but most states in the US this should be perfectly fine. Now, they also scaled back the materials a little bit, and so we got this Micarta on mine. I believe there was a G10 version as well, but I really love the blue Micarta, which I think is the only color it was available in. Looks really great. I'm obviously biased since it's my favorite color, but happy with that. Now, the steel is also scaled back to a 14C28N, which I'm really happy with at this price point. And so that's kind of the last point where they're scaling back. The Pony Stout is significantly cheaper than the original Stout. This was a White Mountain Knives exclusive as far as retailers go, and they had this listed at $75. I picked it at that Blade Show for $60, but either price point I think is an excellent value for this knife. Now, I consider a budget knife to be anything under $75. Obviously, everyone's budgets can be a little bit different, and so if yours is, say, $50, I still think this is an excellent value for money, even if you're not considering it in that budget category. But again, for me, I am. Now, this is OEM'd by QSP, who always does a really great job, and this is no exception. The action on this is really one of the best I have, I think, in terms of an under $75 knife. It's just perfect, and so really happy with that. Now, I already mentioned that blade length being under 3 inches. It's actually 2.84 inches, so a decent bit under 3 inches, but still a decent length blade. They have what they call a sheep's spoon shaped blade, so it's a modified sheep's foot, but you can see this nice cutout, which is a really good resting place for both your thumb or index finger depending on your grip. And so when it comes to grip, you have 3.8 inches on that handle, which if you're sitting in this kind of suggested spot right on that liner lock with your index finger, that gives me a 3-finger grip. My pinky is hanging completely off of the end of that, and I do feel a little bit further back from the blade, but that's not really a problem because you can see it has this sort of half-finger choil that extends into basically a full-finger choil with that handle design, and so you're able to get up just a little bit further, and that grip is excellent. It gives me a full 4-finger grip. I feel locked in. There's no jimping or anything holding me in place, but I feel very secure in there. Don't feel like I'm going to slide up on that blade, and really like the kind of where it weighs in my hand. It just feels super well balanced, and you can see my thumbs kind of sitting on the top section of this thumb hole here, but you can get a little bit further up if you need to onto that cutout. That's also a really nice place for your index finger depending on your grip, and if you do need to get a little bit closer up to that tip, you can as well in that pinch grip, really secure there as well. And you can see it's not a super pointy knife, but it's nice for controlled cuts, getting into packages without really damaging anything inside, and so really like that. It also has a really lovely hollow grind, and so super thin behind the edge, nice and slicey. Have been really impressed with the performance of this, and also just the ergonomics. It's really comfortable, no hot spots whatsoever. Like I said, I'm almost never in this kind of backed up position. That might be comfortable for you, but at least in the positions that I'm in, haven't had any hot spots, including with that pocket clip. Now, the pocket clip is kind of the one downside for me, and that's really just a preference thing, because ergonomically I don't feel it at all. It's not creating a hot spot. It works well, but I'm just not super into wire pocket clips, and so that's the preference thing. If you are, then it's going to be great. No issues with it whatsoever, and it is reversible, so right and left hand friendly, which of course makes sense since he is left-handed. Now, for deployment, it has this hole that you can use for your thumb. I tend to prefer that Spidey flick. The action on it's just so good, and you can get your thumb in there, but I have a harder time getting the meat of my thumb in there, so it's a little bit harder to deploy with the thumb flick, but definitely doable as well. And so it's also a liner lock and on bearings, and so it drops shut, guillotines into your fingernail. You can see I've already left a few scratches on there, so it can destroy your fingernail a little bit, but shouldn't cut you or anything like that. But drop shut, single shake to get it the rest of the way. And so the action on this is absolutely excellent. Super fun to fidget with. And that's honestly probably what sold me on this. I think it's a good, attractive looking knife. Not gonna be, you know, my top 10 best looking knives, but I do think it's a good, above average looking knife. But once I handled it at Blade Show, I knew I wanted to pick it up. Had no intentions of picking it up, just stopped by the booth, and once I was flicking it open a little bit, I'm like, okay, at this price point, I can't pass it up. And so really happy with that. Now, one other thing that you may notice is the branding is really minimal, which I always appreciate. It does have the DK on the pivot, but for Divo Knives, but I do like that as well. It's tooled on only one side, and that's pretty minimal branding overall, and it makes the pivot look a little bit better than just a tooled pivot, and so definitely don't mind that. But you can see a really sterile blade, nothing on that, and so it's a good looking blade that's not marred up by a bunch of branding. Now, they do mark the steel on here, but they tuck it away really nicely, and you may not be able to pick this up on camera. I don't know if my lighting is going to get you in there, but it's basically on the internal section of that backspacer. And so if you're not looking for it, you'll never notice that it says 14C28 in there. And so like that a lot. You can see the backspacer from the other side is nice as well. And then as far as the hardware goes, it's pretty minimal. There's 2 body screws, a pivot, and then of course your pocket clip screws. And every one of those is a T8, which I always appreciate. So even the pocket clip's a T8, which is nice. Body screws, always appreciate that. And then the pivot's a T8. I did see some earlier models, prototypes maybe, that had a T10 pivot, but they did end up being one T8 all the way across the board. And so really appreciate that as well. Now, last thing I should probably talk about is that liner lock doesn't have any jimping either. So I already mentioned no jimping on the spine, but also absent in the liner lock. But don't mind that at all. You have plenty of access. I actually prefer that. I don't love when there's jimping on the liner lock, and if you can give enough access to make it easy to actuate without it, I'd prefer a nice, clean, and smooth liner lock. And so definitely appreciate that about it. But overall, you probably noticed that I really didn't have anything negative to say about this. Obviously, not a huge fan of the pocket clip, but that's a preference thing. There's going to be plenty of people that prefer a wire pocket clip, and so that's perfectly fine. And then in terms of ergos, how it carries in the pocket, that blade shape, the hollow grind, the steel for the price, really happy with almost everything about it. And so when I was thinking about this video, I was trying to think about where this would rank in terms of my budget knives. And I would be surprised if it doesn't end up in my top 5. I'd have to go through a lot of knives to kind of confirm that, but would be surprised if it doesn't end up in my top 5. And I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up in my top 3. The one that comes to mind, one of my favorite budget knives, is the Kaiser Begleiter 2. That one, I think, would still rank ahead of this one. I like the looks of this one better, but I just love the Begleiter 2. So not sure this would supplant that as the #1 pick, but I have a hard time thinking of 2 other knives that would knock this out of the top 3. So really happy with it overall. And maybe eventually I will make that list, but for now I'm just kind of thinking that this is probably in my top 3 under $75 knives that I have in my collection. And I have a decent amount in that price range, so that's obviously pretty impressive. But if you picked this up, if you have this knife, let me know what you think. Am I on point? Are you on the same page as me? Or am I putting this a little bit too high? Obviously, it's going to be subjective. I don't know that you'll really be able to change my mind, but maybe you had a different experience with it. I just got the perfect one, that the action's dialed in, the D10's perfect, and really fits my hand better than most people's. I don't know, but for me, definitely a winner, definitely worth checking out if you have the opportunity to, but would love to hear your thoughts, even if you don't have it, down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification button. And as always, I hope you have a great one. Take care.